Welcome to the second part of the duology video series of basic grammar. Let's start with another basic quote from Clockwork Angel. There is plenty of sense in nonsense sometimes if you wish to look for it. Of course, nonsense at times fits with the author's purpose, but typically that's not the case. I don't think most readers wish to look for it either. To help your reader along, good sentence structure and flow are very important. This part of the duology video will focus on that. There are essentially three basic sentence types that most of what we use in conversation and writing are built off of. These slides will utilize the symbols mentioned in the past video, IC and DC. As a refresher, IC stands for independent clause, or a clause that can stand by itself with a subject, verb, and complete thought. DC stands for dependent clause, meaning a clause that starts with a subordinating conjunction in front of an independent clause, making it unable to stand by itself. If you need to review subordinating conjunctions or the two different clause types, please refer back to the previous video. Back to the point, the three different sentence types are displayed on the screen for you. Already displayed above each is an example. For simple sentence, you can likely tell that the sentence is just an independent clause, with added phrases for detail. For compound sentence, there are two independent clauses connected with the word but in this example. For complex sentence, there is an independent clause immediately followed by a dependent clause. These are basic examples, but let's try another together. Here is a visibly simple sentence, not only in type, but also in content. You can notice that there is a subject, will, a verb, looked, and the completion of a thought with a phrase, at gem. This is just an independent clause standing alone. Simple, right? Now let's add on to it to make a compound sentence by adding another independent clause. Notice how its independent clauses are connected by the word but. The word but is a member of the fanboys family. Here is how compound sentences are built. First, you have the beginning independent clause. Then, since you are adding another independent clause on the end, you need a comma. The fanboys are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. After the comma, place one of the fanboys. Then, finally, add the second independent clause. Back to the topic of the comma. If you are just combining an independent clause and a phrase using fanboys, you shouldn't need to use a comma. Let's go back to the example we were working on. Now I hope you can tell that the compound sentence is simply two independent clauses combined with a fanboys and a comma. Complex sentences aren't necessarily too complex. They consist of an independent clause followed immediately by a dependent clause, or in other words, two independent clauses combined by a subordinating conjunction. This isn't the only way a complex sentence can be formed. Complex sentences can also consist of dependent clauses, followed by a comma, then an independent clause. Take a look at this new example. This example also contains a new compound sentence using a different fanboys. Okay, that was a lot of information at once. Let's try an exercise. The sentence on top is an example of what we're going to be doing. We are going to separate each sentence up into its different parts, specifically what type of clause it is. These are both really long sentences, otherwise referred to as compound complex or complex compound sentences. Compound complex sentences and complex compound sentences are just sentences made up of a combination of the various sentence types. It sounds a bit like a tongue twister at this point. All formal sentences are made up of clauses, so take a minute to try designating the different clause types on your own. That's time. Please pause the video if you need more time to work on it. Here is how I split it up. If you had trouble determining the difference between independent and dependent clauses, I recommend referring back to the first video in this duology. Now, I'd like you all to circle any fanboys or subordinating conjunction on the screen. Essentially, find any indication as to what type of sentence we're working with. If you need more time, I suggest pausing the video. Here I have circled all the fanboys and subordinating conjunctions present in green. Notice how on the top, we have a dependent clause with its subordinating conjunction followed by a comma, and an independent clause showing us a complex sentence. We also have an independent clause followed by a comma and a fanboys, along with another independent clause, representing a compound sentence. This would be considered a complex compound sentence. Let's take a look at the one on the bottom that you annotated yourself. First, we have an independent clause with a subordinating conjunction and another independent clause. What type of sentence is this? Complex. The next sentence is harder to think about, so let's take a second. It's a dependent clause connected to an independent clause, using a comma fanboys. Now, you might be wondering, isn't this not allowed? But think about it. What is a dependent clause? It's a subordinating conjunction followed by an independent clause. This means that it technically is an independent clause being connected to another independent clause using a comma fanboys. And what would this sentence type be? Compound. Then, the last sentence is complex, being an independent clause followed by a subordinating conjunction and another independent clause. That was quite a lesson. Now, I think it will be really helpful to take a look at how varying sentences are utilized in actual writing. Sentence variety is not only a good skill to have, but it's a great way to add intrigue, action, and creativity into how the words jump off the page and into the reader's imagination. Before getting into this, I would like to state that in this video, I'm only covering the 3 basic sentence types. There are countless ways to formulate sentences, but this video is focused on the most basic ones. Here's a quote from page 3 of the well-known children's novel Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. When Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. What type of sentence is this? It's a complex sentence. When is a subordinating conjunction. Why do you think E.B. White decided to use a complex sentence rather than just saying, half an hour later, Mr. Arable carried a carton under his arm? With that new sentence, you lose the detail that Mr. Arable was coming back to the house with the carton. White could have also written, Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later. He carried a carton under his arm. He could have written it as 2 different sentences. As I read that aloud, notice how choppy it sounded. I'll read it again. Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later. He carried a carton under his arm. Compare how I read that to how I read the actual sentence. When Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. The actual sentence reads really well. It sounds much better and it flows better. It also includes all the details needed to have a good image of what's happening. In our Discord server, we recently had a book of the month. We read Lord of the Flies by William Golding. There wasn't much in server participation due to our community size, so make sure to join if you can. Anyway, here's a quote from page 165 of Lord of the Flies. Ralph was kneeling on the remains of the fire, like a sprinter at his mark, and his face was half hidden by hair and smut. Honestly, this sentence reads, audibly, the same as it would have had it just been 2 separate simple sentences instead of a compound sentence. But I personally believe that William Golding decided to use a compound sentence for more of a technical reason. Since both independent clauses have the purpose of describing Ralph's physical appearance, lumping them together with an and can help the reader categorize what they're reading as they read it. It'll help them formulate a better image and categorize separate parts of the scene. That just about sums up what I have for you all for this video duology. I know it was likely a long lecture to sit through, but I really do hope you have gained new knowledge or solidified past understanding. If you have any questions or concerns at all, let us know in the comments below or contact us using the information on our card.co linked in the description. Make sure to hit the like button if this video has helped you, and feel free to share it with friends or anyone else you think would find this series beneficial. Also, subscribe to follow us as we grow as a community and to keep up with our literature-themed videos to be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next writing video.